They told me a woman couldn't run their precious company, that I'd destroy everything their family had built over 3 generations. 5 years later, I stood in their boardroom as they signed the bankruptcy papers, watching their empire crumble exactly as they'd predicted. Except what they didn't know was that I'd orchestrated every bit of the destruction before building something far greater from the ashes. And now they all worked for me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Gabriella Evans, and today I'm the CEO of Meridian Industries, a company worth $800 million. But this story isn't about my current success. It's about how I learned that sometimes the only way to prove your worth is to first prove your enemies right, then show them what real power looks like. 5 years ago, I was nobody in their eyes, a marketing coordinator at Brooks Manufacturing, a century-old industrial equipment company that had been passed down through 3 generations of the Brooks family. The company specialized in precision machinery for automotive manufacturing, and their client list read like a who's who of major car manufacturers across North America. I was 32 years old, had an MBA from Northwestern, and possessed something the Brooks family had never seen before in their sterile traditional company: actual vision for the future. While they were content manufacturing the same equipment their grandfather had designed in the 1940s, I could see the automotive industry shifting toward electric vehicles, automated production, and entirely new manufacturing paradigms. But I wasn't just an employee. I was married to Spencer Brooks, the heir apparent to the family throne, and the company that bore his name. We'd met in business school, where his easy charm and old money confidence had swept me off my feet. What I didn't realize then was that Spencer Brooks saw me as a temporary acquisition, something to enhance his image during his 20s before settling down with someone more suitable for a Brooks family wife. Brooks Manufacturing was more than a company. It was a religion. Founded in 1923 by Spencer's great-grandfather, Harold Brooks, the company had survived the Great Depression, World War II, and multiple economic recessions by sticking to what they knew: building reliable if uninspired industrial equipment. Their factory occupied 12 acres in Grand Rapids, Michigan, employing over 800 people and generating roughly $200 million in annual revenue. The company was run by Spencer's father, Mark Brooks, a stern man in his 60s who treated the business like a sacred trust passed down from on high. Mark had 2 sons, Spencer, the golden child who was groomed from birth to take over, and his younger brother Aaron, who worked in operations but was considered too creative and impractical for serious leadership consideration. The Brooks family owned 80% of the company, with the remaining 20% held by longtime employees and a few outside investors. This meant that family decisions were company decisions, and family opinions carried the weight of corporate policy. When I married Spencer 3 years ago, I thought I was joining a family business where my ideas and education would be valued. I had a marketing degree from Michigan State and an MBA with a focus on industrial innovation. I'd worked for 2 smaller manufacturing companies before Brooks, helping them modernize their processes and expand their market reach. I was naive enough to believe that competence and results would earn me respect in the Brooks family hierarchy. My official title was marketing coordinator, a role that should have involved developing promotional strategies, managing client relationships, and identifying new market opportunities. In reality, I was treated more like an administrative assistant who happened to have an expensive education. My office was in the basement level of the company headquarters, in a converted storage room with no windows and fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. When I requested to be moved to the main marketing floor, Mark Brooks personally denied the request, explaining that space upstairs is reserved for senior staff. I was excluded from strategy meetings, client dinners, and industry conferences. When I suggested developing a digital marketing presence, the company's website looked like it had been designed in 1998. Mark dismissed it as unnecessary flash for a serious business. When I proposed reaching out to electric vehicle manufacturers who would need entirely different types of equipment, Spencer patted my hand and said, "That's very forward-thinking, honey, but let's leave business strategy to the people who understand this industry." The people who understood the industry, apparently, were Mark, Spencer, and a handful of men in their 50s and 60s who had been with the company for decades. They held their important meetings in the executive conference room on the third floor, a wood-paneled sanctuary, with portraits of previous Brooks patriarchs watching over every decision. I was allowed to attend monthly staff meetings where I was expected to provide brief reports on marketing activities, which mostly consisted of updating brochures and maintaining the customer database. Whenever I tried to present new ideas or market research I'd conducted on my own time, I was politely cut off and told to put it in a memo for later review. Those memos disappeared into Mark Brooks's desk drawer, never to be seen again. The Brooks family gatherings were exercises in careful hierarchy and unspoken rules. Every Sunday we attended dinner at Mark and Janet Brooks's sprawling colonial home in the wealthy Forest Hills neighborhood. The house had been in the family for 40 years, filled with antique furniture and oil paintings of stern-looking Brooks ancestors. Janet Brooks, Spencer's mother, was a woman who had perfected the art of polite condescension. She had married into the Brooks family 35 years ago, and her primary accomplishments seemed to be organizing charity galas and maintaining the family's social standing in Grand Rapids society. She treated me with the kind of careful courtesy reserved for temporary guests who might be asked to leave at any moment. "Gabriella dear," she would say in her precisely modulated voice, "how lovely that you're keeping busy with your little marketing projects. Spencer tells me you have such creative ideas." The word creative in Janet Brooks's vocabulary was not a compliment. It was code for unrealistic, unfocused, and ultimately unsuitable for serious business. During these family dinners, the men would retire to Mark's study to discuss business, while the women cleaned up and made polite conversation about social events and charitable commitments. When I tried to join the business discussions, citing my MBA and my position at the company, Mark would smile indulgently and suggest that I might be more comfortable helping Janet with the dishes. Spencer never defended me. He would give me apologetic looks and promise to talk to Dad later, but those conversations never seemed to result in any meaningful changes. Gradually, I realized that Spencer agreed with his father's assessment. I was decoration, not substance. I was supposed to look good at company events and eventually produce the next generation of Brooks heirs, not contribute ideas about business strategy. The breaking point came during the company's annual strategic planning retreat. Every year the Brooks family and senior management spent a weekend at a resort in Traverse City, Michigan, discussing the company's direction for the coming year. As Spencer's wife and a company employee, I assumed I would be included. I was wrong. The retreat is for senior leadership only, Mark informed me when I asked about the arrangements. "I'm sure you understand that sensitive business discussions require a certain level of experience and discretion." Spencer nodded along with his father's explanation, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe next year, once you've been with the company longer," he added weakly. I had been with the company for 18 months. I had an MBA in business strategy. I was married to the heir apparent, but I wasn't senior leadership material. That weekend, while the Brooks family and their chosen advisors planned the company's future, I stayed home and did something that would change everything. I began researching the automotive industry's shift toward electric vehicles and automated manufacturing. I studied Brooks Manufacturing's competitors, analyzed their strengths and weaknesses, and developed a comprehensive plan for how the company could adapt to the changing market. What I discovered shocked me. Brooks Manufacturing wasn't just behind the times. They were heading for disaster. Their largest clients were already starting to shift their manufacturing processes toward technologies that Brooks couldn't provide. Within 5 years, maybe less, the company would be obsolete unless they made dramatic changes. I prepared a detailed presentation with market research, financial projections, and specific recommendations for new product lines and strategic partnerships. I was going to show the Brooks family that their dismissive attitude toward my creative ideas was going to cost them everything. I had no idea that my research would become the blueprint for their destruction and my ultimate victory. But first, I had to learn exactly how little they thought of me and how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place. The presentation opportunity. When Spencer returned from the Traverse City retreat, he was unusually quiet during dinner. He pushed his food around his plate, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, he set down his fork and cleared his throat. "Dad mentioned that you've been asking about getting more involved in strategy discussions," he said carefully. "He thought it might be good for you to present some of your ideas to the senior team. You know, to get it out of your system." Get it out of my system. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As if my MBA and industry research were some kind of phase I was going through, like a child's fascination with becoming an astronaut. But I saw the opportunity for what it was, my chance to prove that I belonged at the decision-making table. I had spent the weekend developing what I knew was a brilliant analysis of the company's position and the industry's future. This was my moment to show them that their assumptions about my capabilities were dangerously wrong. When, I asked, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Next Friday, Dad's giving you 20 minutes during the monthly executive meeting. 20 minutes to present a comprehensive business strategy that could save the company millions of dollars. Most consultants would charge $50,000 for this kind of analysis, but I was getting 20 minutes as a courtesy to the boss's daughter-in-law. I spent the next week perfecting my presentation. I created detailed slides showing the automotive industry's projected shift toward electric vehicles, the timeline for major manufacturers to phase out traditional combustion engines, and the specific opportunities for Brooks Manufacturing to pivot into the emerging market. My research was thorough and undeniable. General Motors had announced plans to go fully electric by 2035. Ford was investing billions in electric vehicle production. Tesla's success had proven there was massive consumer demand for electric vehicles, and every major automaker was scrambling to catch up. Brooks Manufacturing's current product line, precision tooling for traditional engine manufacturing, would become obsolete within a decade. But their expertise in precision machinery could easily be adapted to produce the specialized equipment needed for electric motor manufacturing, battery assembly, and autonomous vehicle sensors. I had identified 3 specific product opportunities that could generate over $50 million in new revenue within 2 years. I had researched potential clients, analyzed competitor weaknesses, and even found preliminary suppliers for the raw materials we would need. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a roadmap to the company's survival and growth. The Brooks Manufacturing Executive Conference Room felt like a courtroom on Friday morning. The long mahogany table was surrounded by 12 men in dark suits, all of whom had been with the company for at least 15 years. At the head of the table sat Mark Brooks, looking every inch the patriarch in his navy suit and gold watch, a watch that had belonged to his father and grandfather before him. Spencer sat to his father's right, avoiding eye contact with me as I entered the room. Aaron Brooks was there too, relegated to a seat near the far end of the table despite being family. He gave me an encouraging nod as I set up my laptop and projector. "Gentlemen," Mark announced, "my daughter-in-law Gabriella has prepared a presentation about some marketing ideas she's been developing. I thought it would be educational for all of us to hear fresh perspective." Educational. As if I were a guest speaker brought in to provide entertainment, not a company employee with genuine strategic insights. I began my presentation with confidence, explaining the automotive industry's transformation and the opportunities it created for innovative manufacturers. I showed them the timeline for electric vehicle adoption, the projected market size, and the specific niches where Brooks Manufacturing could establish dominance. For the first 10 minutes, I had their attention. Several executives leaned forward, making notes. Even Mark Brooks appeared to be listening thoughtfully as I explained how our existing equipment could be modified for electric vehicle component manufacturing. Then I reached the financial projections. Based on conservative estimates, I explained, transitioning 30% of our production capacity to electric vehicle components could generate $57 million in additional revenue by 2025. The initial investment would be approximately $12 million, primarily for equipment upgrades and staff training. The room went silent. Not the good kind of silence that follows a compelling presentation, but the uncomfortable silence that precedes a dismissal. Mark Brooks was the first to speak. "Gabriella, I appreciate the effort you've put into this research. It's clear you've spent considerable time on these projections." The word projections dripped with skepticism. "However," he continued, "I think you may be underestimating the challenges involved in such a dramatic shift. Brooks Manufacturing has succeeded for nearly a century by focusing on what we do best: reliable, proven manufacturing processes. Our clients depend on us for consistency, not experimentation." Devin Olson, the VP of Operations, nodded in agreement. We've built our reputation on delivering the same high-quality products year after year. Our clients know exactly what they're getting when they work with Brooks. Why would we risk that reputation chasing trends that might not pan out? Trends. He called the complete transformation of the automotive industry a trend. With respect, I replied, this isn't a trend. Every major automaker has committed to phasing out combustion engines within the next 15 years. If we don't adapt, our clients will find suppliers who can meet their evolving needs. Spencer finally spoke up, though not in the way I'd hoped. Gabriella makes some interesting points, he said diplomatically. But I think we need to be realistic about implementation timelines. Maybe we should consider a more gradual approach, keeping an eye on developments while focusing on our core business. A more gradual approach. Translation. Let's ignore this until it's too late to respond effectively. Mark Brooks smiled indulgently. I think Spencer has the right idea. Evolution, not revolution. We've survived economic downturns, changing regulations, and shifting market conditions by staying true to our core competency. The dismissal. What happened next was a masterclass in condescending dismissal, disguised as constructive feedback. Gabriella, Mark continued. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this, and I admire your enthusiasm. But business strategy requires understanding not just market trends, but operational realities, client relationships, and financial constraints that can only come from years of hands-on experience. He gestured around the table at the assembled executives. Everyone in this room has at least 20 years of experience in manufacturing. They understand the complexities involved in retooling production lines, retraining workers, and maintaining quality standards during transitions. The implication was crystal clear. I was too inexperienced to understand real business challenges. My MBA was theoretical knowledge. Their decades of doing things the same way was practical wisdom. Perhaps, suggested Devin Olson, Gabriella could work with our marketing team to develop some materials about how Brooks Manufacturing is future-ready for our existing clients. Play up our adaptability without committing to specific changes. Future-ready marketing materials. They wanted to turn my comprehensive strategic analysis into a marketing slogan. That's an excellent suggestion, agreed Mark Brooks. Gabriella, why don't you work with our marketing director to develop some messaging around innovation and adaptability? That would be a valuable contribution. I looked around the room at 12 men who had just dismissed the most important business opportunity in the company's history. They weren't even considering my recommendations, they were patronizing me with busy work that would let them say they'd incorporated my input. Spencer was studying his hands, unable to meet my eyes. Aaron looked frustrated but said nothing. He'd learned long ago that challenging his father in front of the senior team was career suicide. I'll be happy to work on marketing materials, I said evenly. But I'd like to suggest that we also form a small task force to study these opportunities more thoroughly. Even if we decide not to pursue them immediately, we should at least understand our options. Mark Brooks's smile never wavered. I think we've given this plenty of consideration for now. Let's table any further discussion until we see how the current market develops. Table it, indefinitely. As the meeting broke up, several executives made polite comments about my creative thinking and fresh perspective. None of them asked for copies of my research or suggested follow-up meetings. They treated my presentation like an interesting academic exercise with no practical application. That evening, Spencer and I rode home in silence. Finally, as we pulled into our driveway, he turned to me with an expression that was part apology, part frustration. You can't just walk into a room and expect to revolutionize a company that's been successful for nearly a century, he said. These guys have seen dozens of consultants and business school graduates come through with grand plans for transformation. Most of those plans would have cost us millions and delivered nothing. This is different, I replied. I'm not some outside consultant. I'm family. I'm supposed to care about this company's future. Spencer sighed. You are family. But that doesn't mean you understand the business the way Dad and the senior team do. They've navigated challenges you can't even imagine. Challenges I couldn't imagine. Like adapting to the complete transformation of their primary industry. Spencer, I said carefully, what if they're wrong? What if their experience is actually making them blind to changes they need to see? He looked at me with a mixture of patience and pity. Gabriella, honey, I know you want to contribute. but you have to trust that people who've built a $200 million company know what they're doing. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the presentation. I had given them a roadmap to future prosperity, backed by solid research and conservative financial projections. They had dismissed it as the naive enthusiasm of someone too inexperienced to understand real business. But I wasn't naive. I was educated, prepared, and absolutely correct about the industry's direction. Their dismissal wasn't based on the quality of my analysis, it was based on their assumption that a woman, especially a young woman, couldn't possibly understand business strategy better than men with decades of experience. They had made their position clear. I was not leadership material. I was decoration with a degree, someone to smile at company events, and eventually produce the next generation of Brooks men. What they didn't realize was that their condescending dismissal had given me something more valuable than acceptance. It had given me clarity about exactly who I was dealing with, and exactly what I would need to do to prove them wrong. The game had just begun, and they had no idea they were playing against someone who understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. Following my presentation dismissal, I was assigned to work with Jasmine Nylon, Brooks Manufacturing's marketing director. Jasmine had learned to navigate the company's male-dominated culture by keeping her head down and executing orders without question. So, Jasmine said with a weary smile, "Mark wants us to develop some future-ready messaging. He was specific that we keep it general, no mention of electric vehicles or specific product pivots." Over the next week, we developed marketing materials that managed to say absolutely nothing while sounding progressive. Phrases like adaptable solutions for tomorrow's challenges and innovation built on tradition. The real education came 3 weeks later during a client dinner at the Grand Rapids Country Club. I was seated to smile and make polite conversation while the men discussed business. Janet Brooks had coached me about appropriate topics: weather, charitable events, wine selection. Under no circumstances was I to bring up business strategy. But as the evening progressed, I couldn't help but listen. Michael Davidson from Ford was explaining their timeline for electric vehicle production scaling. "We're looking at a complete transformation of our supplier needs within 7 years. Traditional engine components will represent less than 20% of our parts requirements by 2030. Mark Brooks nodded politely but gave vague answers about monitoring developments and adapting as appropriate. When Davidson asked about Brooks Manufacturing's plans for electric vehicle manufacturing, Mark clearly had no substantive response. At the next table, Susan Chen from General Motors was discussing their search for new suppliers for battery assembly lines. "We've been interviewing manufacturers across the Midwest. The challenge is finding companies with both precision capabilities and willingness to invest in new equipment." This was exactly the opportunity I had identified. General Motors was actively seeking suppliers for the exact services Brooks Manufacturing could provide with modest upgrades, but Mark Brooks was sitting 20 feet away, completely unaware. The most revealing moment came in the ladies' lounge. Susan Chen was touching up her lipstick beside me. "You're Spencer Brooks's wife, aren't you? You work for the company too?" "I do some marketing coordination," I said carefully. "Well, between you and me, I hope someone over there is thinking seriously about the electric vehicle transition. We're finalizing our supplier list for battery assembly equipment by the end of this year. I've been hoping Brooks Manufacturing would submit a proposal, but I haven't heard anything." My heart was racing. General Motors was practically begging Brooks Manufacturing to bid on a multi-million-dollar contract, and Mark Brooks had no idea the opportunity existed. On the drive home, I carefully broached the subject with Spencer. Susan Chen mentioned they're finalizing supplier lists for battery assembly equipment. She seemed surprised that Brooks Manufacturing hasn't submitted any proposals. Spencer frowned. "You weren't supposed to be discussing business tonight. These dinners are about relationship building, not sales pitches." I wasn't making sales pitches. I was listening to our clients describe their needs. "That's not your job. Dad and the senior team handle client relationships. You were there as my wife, not as a business strategist." That night, I processed everything I had witnessed. The Brooks family leadership wasn't just resistant to change, they were actively blind to information right in front of them. Mark Brooks dismissed insights from women generally, regardless of their credentials or position. Susan Chen was a director at one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers with an MBA from Wharton and 15 years of experience. When she described General Motors' supplier needs, Mark Brooks treated it as social chit-chat rather than business intelligence. Their blindness could become my greatest advantage. They thought my gender made me irrelevant to serious business discussions. They had no idea it was about to make me the most dangerous person in their industry. Following the country club revelation, I began the documentation project, carefully recording every conversation, missed opportunity, and dismissive comment in an encrypted folder. Jasmine, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit, began sharing insights she'd never voiced before. Last month, Devin Olson spent 20 minutes explaining why we shouldn't update our production scheduling software, Jasmine told me. The current system was designed in 1987, but Devin insisted that our people are comfortable with the existing workflow. What was his real objection? The software upgrade would have required training sessions led by a female consultant. Devin made some comment about not needing outsiders to tell us how to run our business, but I think he couldn't handle taking direction from a woman. This was becoming a pattern. Brooks Manufacturing worked almost exclusively with suppliers run by older white men. When Jasmine showed me rejected proposals, I noticed that Mark Brooks had dismissed every company with female leadership, regardless of pricing or quality advantages. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a supplier proposal. "Their quote is 15% lower, their quality certifications are superior, and their delivery timeline is half as long. Why was this rejected?" The CEO is Elena Rodriguez. After her presentation, I heard Mark tell Spencer that she seemed aggressive and pushy. He wasn't comfortable with her management style. My understanding deepened when I started paying attention to Aaron Brooks, Spencer's younger brother. Aaron had an MIT mechanical engineering degree and had worked for a German manufacturing company, but his suggestions were routinely dismissed with the same condescending tone used for my ideas. "Aaron's too theoretical," Mark would say. "He doesn't understand the practical realities of our business." But Aaron's knowledge was exactly what the company needed. He casually mentioned that Brooks Manufacturing's production efficiency was roughly 30% lower than industry standards because they refused to implement automated quality control systems. My marketing role gave me legitimate reasons to research competitors, and what I discovered was alarming. Meridian Industries had been roughly the same size as Brooks 5 years ago. Now they were generating 3 times the revenue by focusing on electric vehicle components. Advanced Manufacturing Solutions had grown revenue by 150% in 3 years using automated systems. The true scope of Brooks Manufacturing's declining position became clear during a client feedback session. I attended as administrative support for note-taking, which meant I was present but invisible. Michael Davidson from Ford was diplomatically direct. "Brooks has been a reliable partner, but we're finding that other suppliers are more responsive to our evolving requirements." When Mark asked for specifics, Davidson said, "We've been discussing electric vehicle component needs for 18 months. We've had multiple conversations about battery assembly tooling requirements, but we haven't received any proposals or even preliminary quotes from Brooks." Mark looked genuinely confused. "I wasn't aware you needed formal proposals. I thought those were exploratory discussions." Susan Chen from General Motors was more direct. "Mark, we've been hoping Brooks would bid on our upcoming automated assembly line project. The RFP was distributed 6 months ago. The deadline is next month." Mark clearly had no idea what RFP she was referring to. Neither of them had been paying attention to their clients' actual needs. Through Jasmine's connections, I learned that Brooks Manufacturing was increasingly seen as a relic at industry conferences. A cautionary tale of what happens when family businesses refuse to evolve. The Brooks family wasn't just missing opportunities, they were becoming isolated from the conversations shaping the industry's future. Their systematic blindness wasn't just hurting their business, it was creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood their weaknesses. The escalation began during Brooks Manufacturing's third-quarter review meeting. For the first time in 99 years, they had posted a quarterly loss. Revenue was down 18%, and 3 major clients had terminated contracts within 6 months. I was setting up the projector when senior executives filed in. Mark Brooks looked haggard, his commanding presence diminished by numbers that couldn't be spun. "Gentlemen, we're facing some unexpected challenges this quarter." Unexpected. As if the warning signs hadn't been flashing for months, Devin Olson presented the breakdown. Lost contracts totaled $47 million in annual revenue. 3 competitors had underbid Brooks by 20 to 30%. Ford had quietly shifted 60% of their business to advanced manufacturing solutions. "The question is how we respond to this temporary setback," Mark said. Spencer cleared his throat. "Dad, maybe we should consider adjusting our pricing strategy." "Absolutely not." Mark snapped. "Brooks Manufacturing has never competed on price alone. Our value proposition is quality and reliability." Aaron spoke quietly from the far end of the table. "Client feedback suggests pricing isn't the only issue. They're questioning our quality control and delivery times compared to automated competitors." Mark's face flushed. "Our quality control has been the industry standard for decades. We're not going to panic and overhaul proven processes because of a few complaints." "But Dad, Advanced Manufacturing Solutions is delivering parts with half our defect rate in 60% of our production time. That's not a few complaints, that's a fundamental competitive disadvantage." Mark stood slowly. "Aaron, you're still young enough to be impressed by flashy technology. This company survived the Great Depression and 2 world wars by sticking to proven principles." Instead of addressing systemic issues, Mark began looking for scapegoats. He blamed the sales team for being complacent and threatened to fire the head of sales for suggesting the company's approach needed updating. Then Mark turned his attention to what he called distractions from core business focus. "We've allowed ourselves to get sidetracked by theoretical discussions about industry trends and hypothetical opportunities," he said, his eyes settling on me. "Some people have been pushing experimental approaches that would require massive investments with uncertain returns." He was turning my electric vehicle presentation into a distraction that had contributed to the company's problems. "Furthermore, we've been entertaining input from individuals who lack the experience to understand the complexities of our business. This has led to confusion about our strategic priorities." Aaron couldn't contain himself. "Dad, that's not fair." Gabriella's analysis was thorough and accurate. "The problems we're facing now are exactly what she predicted." Mark's face turned crimson. "Business decisions can't be influenced by personal relationships. We need objective analysis based on experience, not academic theories." The meeting ended with Mark issuing an ultimatum. "Going forward, all strategic discussions will be limited to senior leadership with direct operational responsibility. Gabriella, I think it would be best if you focused on your assigned marketing coordination duties. Strategic planning is beyond the scope of your role." Spencer finally spoke, but not in support. "Dad's right. We need to maintain clear boundaries between different levels of responsibility." Following the meeting, my isolation became complete. Jasmine was instructed to refocus on traditional messaging. My access to client information was restricted. Even routine tasks were reassigned. Spencer's behavior at home became distant. When I asked about the company's response to losses, he gave vague answers about focusing on core competencies. But the most telling change was how other employees treated me. Word had spread that including me in discussions was politically dangerous. The Brooks family had made a critical error. In their effort to silence me, they had revealed the full extent of their vulnerability. They would rather fail than admit they had been wrong. Their stubbornness had just given me complete moral clarity about what needed to be done. 3 weeks after the quarterly review, I was called into Mark Brooks's office. The mahogany space felt like a mausoleum, filled with portraits of dead patriarchs and awards from a more successful era. Mark sat behind his massive desk, a termination letter positioned precisely in front of him. "Gabriella, we've decided that your position as marketing coordinator is no longer necessary. The company is restructuring to focus on core competencies, and we're eliminating roles that don't directly contribute to operational efficiency." He couldn't even admit he was firing me for challenging his authority. "Your final day will be Friday. Janet has prepared a severance package that reflects the family's appreciation for your contributions. 2 weeks' pay." After 18 months of watching them ignore million-dollar opportunities, they were offering 2 weeks' pay to disappear quietly. Where is Spencer? Shouldn't he be part of this conversation? Mark's smile was cold. Spencer agrees that this is the right decision for everyone involved. He's in meetings with clients today. Spencer wasn't in client meetings. He was avoiding the conversation because he didn't have the courage to fire his own wife. I cleaned out my basement office in 20 minutes. 18 months of work fit into a single cardboard box. The drive home was surreal, but as I sat in my car in our driveway, I felt something unexpected: relief. For 18 months I had been beating my head against willful ignorance and systematic sexism. Now I was free from their dysfunction, free to think clearly about what came next. I pulled out my phone and made the first call of my new life. "Aaron, we need to talk." Aaron met me at a coffee shop downtown. He looked tired and frustrated, aged beyond his years by watching his family's company deteriorate. "They fired you," he said. It wasn't a question. This morning. Mark couldn't even wait until Spencer got back. "What about you? Are you planning to stick around and watch them destroy everything?" Aaron was quiet, stirring his coffee with mechanical precision. "This company could be saved. The fundamentals are sound, but not under current leadership. So what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet, but I've been documenting everything: missed opportunities, client complaints, financial decline." "Aaron, what if there was another option? What if someone built a competitor that could do everything Brooks Manufacturing should be doing?" His eyes sharpened. "What are you thinking? You understand the technical side better than anyone in that building. I understand business strategy and market opportunities they're ignoring. Together, we could build something that would make Brooks Manufacturing irrelevant. That would require significant capital, industry connections, and detailed knowledge of Brooks Manufacturing's weaknesses, client relationships, and operational vulnerabilities, which we have." Aaron was quiet, clearly wrestling with competing against his family's company. "They'll see it as betrayal," he said finally. "They already see us as threats. The only question is whether we're going to let them continue marginalizing us, or whether we're going to build something better." That evening, I waited for Spencer. When he finally came home at 9, he looked guilty and defensive. "Gabriella, I want you to know that I fought for you. But Dad made a business decision. Stop lying to me. You didn't fight for anything. You let your father fire your wife, rather than risk your position." Spencer's face flushed. "It's more complicated than that. The company is going through a difficult time. The company is failing, because your father refuses to adapt. I tried to help. You dismissed my ideas, and now you're pretending this is unavoidable. What do you want me to say? That I should have chosen my wife over my family's company? I want you to admit that you never saw me as a partner. I was decoration for your business school phase." Spencer stared at me, and I saw the exact instant when he decided to stop pretending. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I never took your business opinions seriously. You have a degree and some theories, but you don't understand the realities of running a manufacturing company. In that case, we have nothing more to discuss." That night, alone in a hotel room, I felt the strangest sense of liberation. For the first time in 18 months, I could think clearly without worrying about Spencer's career or the Brooks family's feelings. By dawn, I had filled 12 pages with notes and preliminary plans. The Brooks family thought they had solved their problem by getting rid of me. They had no idea they had just created their worst nightmare. My investigation began with digital archaeology, systematically excavating every piece of publicly available information about Brooks Manufacturing. From my hotel room, I spent 12 hours a day researching financial history, regulatory filings, client relationships, and competitive position. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. Brooks Manufacturing's decline wasn't recent. It had been accelerating for 5 years. Market share had dropped from 37% to 23%. Profit margins had shrunk by 40%. Client retention had fallen from 94% to 76%. The most valuable discovery came from regulatory filings buried in government databases. Brooks Manufacturing was carrying $18 million in debt, mostly secured against real estate and equipment. Cash flow was negative for 7 of the past 12 months. They had defaulted on 2 supplier payments in the past quarter. The company wasn't just struggling, it was on the verge of insolvency. I began systematically contacting Brooks Manufacturing's supplier network, presenting myself as a consultant conducting market research. The picture was devastating. Payment delays had become routine, order volumes were declining, and suppliers were actively seeking alternative customers. David Chen, the former Brooks employee now at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions, agreed to meet. Brooks Manufacturing is living in the past, he explained. Their equipment is outdated, their processes are inefficient, and their leadership refuses to acknowledge that the industry has moved beyond their capabilities. How long can they continue operating at current performance levels? Honestly, maybe 18 months before bankruptcy. Advanced Manufacturing has been taking their clients one by one. Ford is planning to phase out their Brooks contracts entirely by next year. This timeline was crucial. If Brooks was going to collapse anyway, I needed to position myself to benefit from their failure, rather than simply competing with them. Through Aaron's insider knowledge and my external research, we mapped their client vulnerabilities. Ford was already sourcing 40% of precision components from competitors. General Motors had initiated supplier evaluation that would likely result in contract changes within 6 months. Chrysler was seeking quotes from alternative suppliers for electric vehicle production. The most valuable intelligence came from Ella Nylon, who worked in procurement for Tesla. During a networking event, she revealed that Tesla was expanding their supplier network. We're looking for manufacturers who can meet aerospace-level precision at automotive production scales. Most traditional suppliers can't match our quality standards. What would it take for a new supplier to get considered? Demonstrated capability, competitive pricing, and ability to scale rapidly. We're less concerned about established relationships than performance metrics. Through Aaron's access to internal information, we constructed detailed analysis of Brooks Manufacturing's financial vulnerabilities. Their debt structure was particularly problematic. Most borrowing was tied to equipment purchases, with performance covenants they would violate within 6 months. More dangerous was their supplier payment situation. Brooks owed over $3 million to key suppliers, and several were threatening cash-on-delivery terms. If that happened, their strained cash flow would become untenable. But the most interesting vulnerability was structural. Brooks Manufacturing's value was tied to client relationships and reputation for reliability. If those relationships could be systematically undermined, the company would become worthless overnight. My investigation's final component involved assessing human resources, which employees were talented but frustrated, which positions were critical, which people might join a startup offering better opportunities. Brooks Manufacturing employed several dozen highly skilled workers who were demoralized by declining performance and resistance to modernization. Many had been there for years but were frustrated by lack of advancement and investment in new equipment. Half the production team is actively looking for other jobs, Aaron reported. Skilled machinists know they could make more money at companies with modern equipment. Quality control supervisors are tired of fighting defective products from outdated processes. After 6 weeks, I possessed comprehensive understanding of Brooks Manufacturing's position that was more accurate than anything available to their own leadership. The company was financially vulnerable, operationally inefficient, and strategically mispositioned. I had identified the exact timeline for their collapse, specific vulnerabilities that could accelerate their decline, and opportunities that would emerge when they failed. The investigation phase was complete. Now it was time to begin building the weapon that would destroy everything Mark Brooks had refused to protect. I rented a small office space in downtown Indianapolis, far from Grand Rapids but close enough for Aaron to drive down for planning sessions. The space became our war room for planning what would become the most comprehensive corporate takedown in Michigan's manufacturing history. The walls were covered with charts, timelines, and detailed analyses of every aspect of Brooks Manufacturing's business. Financial projections, client relationship maps, supplier networks, employee assessments, and competitive landscapes filled every surface. Aaron had taken leave from Brooks Manufacturing, citing stress and need to evaluate career options. Mark Brooks was surprisingly supportive, probably relieved to have his troublesome younger son away during the company's difficult period. Our first decision was philosophical. Were we building a competitor to Brooks Manufacturing or Brooks Manufacturing's replacement? The distinction was crucial, because it would determine our entire strategic approach. A competitor tries to take market share from an existing company, I explained. A replacement makes the existing company obsolete by doing everything they do but better. Aaron studied financial projections. Given their debt situation and client losses, they might not survive long enough for traditional competition to matter. Maybe we should be planning to acquire their assets when they inevitably collapse. This insight shifted our entire framework. Instead of competing with Brooks Manufacturing, we would accelerate their decline while positioning ourselves to benefit from their failure. My investigation revealed that starting a precision manufacturing company required approximately $8 million in initial capital. But Aaron's analysis suggested a more elegant approach. Brooks Manufacturing owns $12 million in machinery and equipment, most purchased within the last decade. When they default on loans, that equipment will be auctioned at a fraction of its value. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We would raise enough capital to purchase Brooks Manufacturing's equipment at bankruptcy prices, then combine it with modern automation to create manufacturing capability that far exceeded what Brooks had achieved. David Chen at Advanced Manufacturing Solutions was intrigued by our plans. Advanced Manufacturing is looking to expand into electric vehicle components, but our facilities are at capacity. We've been considering strategic partnerships with specialized manufacturers. Advanced Manufacturing could provide initial capital and client connections in exchange for partnership agreement that would give us immediate market credibility. Our strategic planning revealed 3 distinct phases for Brooks Manufacturing's destruction and our company's emergence. Phase 1 would focus on accelerating Brooks Manufacturing's client losses. Aaron's insider knowledge allowed us to identify specific contract renewal dates and competitive vulnerabilities. We would systematically approach their clients with better alternatives. Ford's contract comes up for renewal in 4 months, Aaron explained. But their electric vehicle division is already sourcing from other suppliers. If we could demonstrate capability to handle traditional components at better prices, we could accelerate their decision to phase out Brooks entirely. Phase 2 would involve strategic talent acquisition. As Brooks Manufacturing's situation deteriorated, their best employees would become increasingly open to alternatives. The production supervisor, Michael Evans, has been with Brooks for 8 years. He's frustrated with their resistance to process improvements. If we offered him a chance to implement modern techniques with proper equipment, he'd probably jump at the opportunity. Phase 3 would be acquisition of Brooks Manufacturing's assets at bankruptcy prices, combined with launch of our operations using their former clients, employees, and equipment. Our market analysis revealed that Brooks Manufacturing's decline had created a gap in regional precision manufacturing that we could exploit immediately. Their former clients were struggling to find alternatives that matched traditional quality levels, while newer competitors lacked capacity for large orders. Aaron had identified specific technical advantages we could achieve. Automated quality control would give us defect rates 50% lower than Brooks ever achieved. Computer-controlled scheduling would cut delivery times by 30%. Modern machinery would reduce production costs by 25%. Given the personal relationships involved, we consulted with Janet Olson, a corporate attorney specializing in manufacturing businesses. You can't use proprietary information or trade secrets, but publicly available information, industry knowledge, and general business insights are fair game. Our strategic planning was complete. We had a timeline, capital strategy, competitive framework, and moral clarity about our objectives. Now it was time to begin the systematic destruction of everything Mark Brooks thought he had built to last forever. My first meeting with Dr. Elizabeth Chen at Meridian Investment Group took place in her Chicago office overlooking Lake Michigan. Elizabeth was a former Boeing executive who had transitioned into venture capital after building a reputation for identifying promising manufacturing technologies. "Your business plan is impressive," Elizabeth said, reviewing documents I had spent weeks perfecting. "The precision manufacturing market is ripe for innovation, and your analysis of current inefficiencies is thorough. But I have concerns about your timeline." She was referring to my projection that we could achieve operational status within 8 months. Most manufacturing startups required 2 to 3 years. The timeline assumes we'll be acquiring existing equipment rather than purchasing new machinery, I explained. We've identified specific assets that will become available through distressed sales within our target timeframe. Elizabeth's eyes sharpened. "You're planning to acquire a competitor's assets. We're planning to acquire assets from a company that's failing due to poor management and strategic positioning. Our analysis suggests they'll be forced into bankruptcy within 18 months. I couldn't reveal that the failing company was my former employer, but I could present publicly available information that painted a clear picture of Brooks Manufacturing's declining position. Elizabeth spent 2 hours reviewing our market analysis, financial projections, and operational plans. I'm prepared to offer initial funding of $3 million, with additional tranches based on milestone achievements. But I want monthly progress reports and assurance that your approach is legally and ethically sound. Aaron and I established Precision Dynamics LLC with a complex ownership structure designed to protect individual interests while facilitating rapid growth. I retained controlling interest as CEO, while Aaron became Chief Technology Officer with significant equity. Janet Olson helped us create subsidiary companies for different operations. PD Manufacturing would handle production. PD Engineering would focus on design and development. PD Consulting would provide strategic advisory services. This structure allowed us to begin generating revenue immediately through consulting contracts, while building toward full manufacturing capability. It also created legal barriers between activities, protecting us from potential conflicts related to Aaron's former employer. While Aaron focused on operational planning, I concentrated on building technological foundation that would give us competitive advantages. Our approach centered on integration, combining modern equipment with advanced software, to create capabilities that exceeded what individual components could achieve. We partnered with Advanced Automation Systems, a software company specializing in manufacturing execution systems. Their platform could integrate production scheduling, quality control, inventory management, and client communication into a single system, providing real-time visibility. Traditional manufacturers like Brooks rely on manual processes and disconnected systems, explained Sarah Chen, Advanced Automation's implementation specialist. Your integrated approach will give you speed and accuracy advantages they can't match. Building our workforce required delicate balance between recruiting experienced personnel and maintaining confidentiality. Aaron's industry connections proved invaluable for identifying candidates frustrated with current positions and open to new opportunities. Michael Evans, the production supervisor from Brooks Manufacturing, was our first major recruitment success. During a conference encounter, Aaron approached him about opportunities in advanced manufacturing. "I'm tired of fighting outdated equipment and processes," Michael told us during a confidential meeting. Brooks Manufacturing could be competitive if they invested in modern systems, but Mark Brooks refuses to spend money on anything invented after 1990. Rather than directly competing for Brooks Manufacturing's existing clients, we focused on developing relationships with companies representing the future of precision manufacturing demand. Electric vehicle manufacturers, renewable energy companies, and advanced technology firms were actively seeking suppliers who could meet specialized requirements. Ella Nylon's connection at Tesla led to our first major client development opportunity. Tesla was launching a supplier development program to identify manufacturers capable of producing components for next-generation battery systems. Our initial proposal focused on battery housing components requiring complex machining with extremely tight tolerances. We demonstrated how our integrated technology platform could provide real-time quality verification and production tracking that exceeded industry standards. Perhaps our most valuable asset was the information network we developed throughout the precision manufacturing industry. Through professional relationships, trade associations, and strategic partnerships, we gained access to market intelligence that traditional companies rarely possessed. The foundation was complete. We had capital, technology, talent, and market intelligence. We had legal protection and ethical clarity. Most importantly, we had comprehensive understanding of our target market and our primary competitors' vulnerabilities. Brooks Manufacturing was about to discover that their former employees had become their most dangerous competition. 6 months after establishing Precision Dynamics, we executed what I called our soft launch, beginning operations without directly competing with Brooks Manufacturing's core business. Instead, we focused on market segments that Brooks had been neglecting or unable to serve effectively. Our first major contract came from an unexpected source. Renewable Energy Solutions, a wind turbine manufacturer that needed precision components for their next-generation turbine designs. The parts required tolerances that Brooks Manufacturing's aging equipment couldn't reliably achieve, and the production volumes were too small for larger competitors to consider profitable. "This is exactly the kind of project Brooks used to excel at," Aaron observed as we reviewed the technical specifications. 20 years ago, they would have been the obvious choice for this contract, but their equipment hasn't been upgraded since then, and their quality control systems can't verify the tolerances these components require. The irony was perfect. We were succeeding in markets where Brooks Manufacturing should have been competitive, using the same fundamental capabilities they possessed, but with modern execution. The Renewable Energy Solutions contract was worth $1.8 million over 18 months, not enough to threaten Brooks Manufacturing's core business, but sufficient to establish our operational credibility and generate positive cash flow. More importantly, it gave us a reference client we could use when approaching other potential customers. Success breeds success in manufacturing, and our ability to deliver complex components on time and within specifications would become the foundation for larger opportunities. While we were building operational capability, I launched a carefully orchestrated industry positioning campaign designed to establish Precision Dynamics as the future of precision manufacturing. The campaign was subtle but comprehensive, focusing on thought leadership rather than direct advertising. I began writing articles for industry publications about trends in precision manufacturing, automation benefits, and the importance of adapting to electric vehicle market demands. Each article included case studies and examples that highlighted exactly the kind of capabilities Precision Dynamics offered, without ever mentioning Brooks Manufacturing or other specific competitors. The future of precision manufacturing, integration, automation, and adaptability appeared in Modern Manufacturing Monthly and generated significant attention from industry leaders. The article described how manufacturers could achieve competitive advantages through integrated technology platforms, exactly the approach we had implemented at Precision Dynamics. Aaron contributed technical papers about advanced machining techniques and quality control systems. His articles appeared in Engineering Excellence Quarterly and Manufacturing Technology Review, establishing him as a thought leader in production optimization. These publications served multiple purposes. They positioned us as industry experts, attracted attention from potential clients, and subtly undermined Brooks Manufacturing's traditional approach without directly attacking them. The positioning campaign also included speaking engagements at industry conferences. Was it according Persestemord? I was invited to present at the Midwest Manufacturing Summit on competitive strategies for emerging market demands. My presentation focused on how manufacturers could adapt to electric vehicle requirements, using examples that made Brooks Manufacturing's limitations obvious without explicitly naming them. Our most important positioning work involved cultivating relationships with Brooks Manufacturing's existing clients. Rather than directly competing for their current business, we focused on understanding their evolving needs and positioning ourselves for future opportunities. Susan Chen from General Motors had mentioned their search for electric vehicle component suppliers during that country club dinner months earlier. Now, through professional networking channels, I arranged to meet with her procurement team about Precision Dynamics' capabilities in advanced automotive components. "We're impressed with your integrated approach to quality control," Susan told me during our formal presentation. "Most suppliers can provide either high precision or high volume, but your system seems designed to deliver both simultaneously." The key was demonstrating capabilities that Brooks Manufacturing couldn't match. Our real-time quality monitoring, automated production scheduling, and digital client communication systems represented a generational advancement over traditional manufacturing approaches. "When you're ready to move beyond your current supplier relationships," I said carefully, "we'd welcome the opportunity to prove our capabilities with a pilot project." Susan's response was encouraging. "Actually, we're planning to diversify our supplier base for the next generation of electric vehicle components. Traditional automotive suppliers haven't been able to meet our precision requirements for battery housing systems." This was exactly the opening I had anticipated. General Motors was looking for alternatives to their current suppliers, including Brooks Manufacturing, but they needed proof that new suppliers could deliver at the required scale and quality levels. As Precision Dynamics became operational, our competitive intelligence capabilities expanded significantly. Our growing network of industry contacts provided real-time information about market developments, client preferences, and competitor performance. Michael Evans, our former Brooks Manufacturing production supervisor, proved particularly valuable for understanding Brooks' operational challenges. His knowledge of their equipment limitations, process inefficiencies, and quality control problems gave us detailed insights into their competitive vulnerabilities. Brooks just lost another quality control inspector, Michael reported during one of our weekly operations meetings. They're down to 3 inspectors for the entire production floor, and 2 of them are planning to retire within the next year. This information was publicly verifiable. Anyone could observe staff levels during facility visits or industry networking events, but Michael's insider perspective helped us understand the implications. Brooks Manufacturing's quality control capabilities were deteriorating at exactly the time when client demands for precision were increasing. Aaron maintained contact with several former colleagues who were still at Brooks Manufacturing. Their informal conversations provided insights into company morale, management decisions, and strategic planning that proved invaluable for anticipating Brooks' next moves. Dad's convinced that the market will return to traditional approaches once the electric vehicle fad passes. Aaron reported after a family dinner where business topics had been discussed. He's not even considering investments in equipment that could handle electric vehicle components. This intelligence confirmed that Brooks Manufacturing was doubling down on their traditional approach rather than adapting to market changes. Their strategic inflexibility was creating opportunities for companies like Precision Dynamics that were positioned to serve emerging market segments. Perhaps our most effective positioning strategy involved applying subtle financial pressure to Brooks Manufacturing through strategic timing of our market activities. We scheduled our major announcements, contract awards, and capability demonstrations to coincide with Brooks' quarterly reporting periods and client renewal cycles. When Brooks Manufacturing announced their second consecutive quarterly loss, Precision Dynamics simultaneously announced the completion of our first major project with Renewable Energy Solutions, delivered ahead of schedule and under budget. The contrast was intentional and effective. When Ford began evaluating suppliers for their electric vehicle expansion, we made sure our Tesla supplier qualification announcement appeared in industry publications the same week. The message was clear. Precision Dynamics was winning business in the markets that represented manufacturing's future. Elizabeth Chen from Meridian Investment Group was particularly impressed with our market positioning strategy. "You're not just competing for existing business," she observed during one of our quarterly reviews. "You're redefining what clients should expect from precision manufacturing suppliers." This was exactly the positioning we had planned. Instead of fighting for Brooks Manufacturing's existing market share, we were expanding the market and establishing ourselves as the leader in emerging segments. By the end of our first operational year, Precision Dynamics had achieved something remarkable. We were profitable, growing, and recognized as an industry innovator, all while operating in market segments that our competitors were ignoring or unable to serve effectively. Our client list included 3 renewable energy companies, 2 electric vehicle startups, and an aerospace manufacturer that needed specialty components for satellite systems. None of these clients would have been natural fits for Brooks Manufacturing's traditional approach, but all represented the high-precision, high-value markets where manufacturing was heading. More importantly, we had established proof of concept for our integrated approach to precision manufacturing. Clients weren't just buying components from us, they were buying capabilities that their traditional suppliers couldn't match. The industry was beginning to take notice. Trade publications were writing about Precision Dynamics as an example of next-generation manufacturing excellence. Industry analysts were citing us as evidence that smaller, more agile companies could compete effectively with established manufacturers. Brooks Manufacturing was still larger, still had more resources, and still controlled significant market share in traditional automotive components, but they were increasingly seen as representing the industry's past, while we represented its future. The positioning phase was complete. Now it was time to begin the direct confrontation that would determine which vision of precision manufacturing would ultimately prevail. 18 months after my termination from Brooks Manufacturing, their decline had accelerated beyond even my most pessimistic projections. Aaron's inside information, combined with publicly available financial data, painted a picture of systematic collapse. Brooks Manufacturing had lost 47% of their major automotive contracts in the past year. Ford had completely eliminated them from their supplier list, citing persistent quality control issues and inability to meet delivery commitments. General Motors had reduced their Brooks orders by 60%, transitioning to what they diplomatically called more strategic supplier relationships. The human cost was becoming visible. Brooks had laid off 130 employees in 6 months, including skilled machinists who had been with the company for over a decade. The remaining workforce was demoralized and increasingly unreliable. "The production floor feels like a ghost town," Michael Evans reported during our information gathering sessions. He maintained contact with former colleagues still at Brooks. "Half the CNC machines are down for maintenance at any given time, and they can't afford to replace worn-out tooling. Quality control has basically given up on meeting specifications. They're just trying to ship products that won't get immediately rejected." But the most telling indicator was Mark Brooks himself. According to Aaron's observations during family gatherings, his father had become defensive, paranoid, and increasingly isolated from reality. "Dad's convinced that competitors are deliberately sabotaging their client relationships," Aaron told me after a Sunday dinner. "He thinks Ford dropped them because Advanced Manufacturing Solutions offered kickbacks to procurement managers. He can't accept that they lost business because they couldn't deliver competitive products." Mark Brooks was responding to crisis by doubling down on the same attitudes that had created the crisis. Instead of acknowledging that Brooks Manufacturing needed to modernize, he was blaming external forces for entirely self-inflicted problems. The supplier network collapse was perhaps the most devastating aspect. Companies that had worked with Brooks for decades were demanding cash payments in advance, unwilling to extend credit to an increasingly unreliable customer. "They're paying 30% above market rates for steel because their credit rating has been downgraded twice," Aaron revealed. "But they can't pass those costs along to clients because they're already overpriced compared to competitors." The deteriorating conditions created unprecedented talent acquisition opportunities. Margaret Olson, Brooks Manufacturing's former quality control manager, approached us about joining Precision Dynamics after 12 years with the company. "I couldn't watch them destroy everything we had built," Margaret explained. "Quality control became impossible when they stopped investing in calibrated equipment and started pressuring inspectors to pass marginal products just to meet shipping deadlines. Over 6 months we recruited 8 former Brooks employees, including CNC programmers, experienced machinists, and production supervisors. Each recruitment was carefully managed to avoid legal issues, but the cumulative effect was devastating to Brooks Manufacturing's operational capability. As Brooks Manufacturing's reputation declined, Precision Dynamics' reputation was simultaneously rising. Our success with initial contracts had generated word-of-mouth recommendations leading to increasingly significant opportunities. The breakthrough came when Tesla awarded us a development contract for prototype battery housing components. The project was worth only $400,000, but it represented validation from one of the most demanding manufacturers in the automotive industry. Our intelligence network provided increasingly detailed information about Brooks Manufacturing's approaching financial collapse. The company was surviving month to month by liquidating assets, delaying supplier payments, and borrowing against equipment already pledged as collateral. "They've sold 2 acres of their property to a development company," Aaron reported. "The cash will keep them operating for maybe 3 months, but they're literally selling off pieces of the company to meet payroll." Elizabeth Chen's analysis confirmed our intelligence. Brooks Manufacturing will be technically insolvent within 6 months. Their debt service requirements exceed their cash flow, and they've exhausted most options for additional borrowing. The timing was perfect for our acquisition strategy. Brooks Manufacturing's equipment would be available at bankruptcy auction prices exactly when we needed additional production capacity. Perhaps the most satisfying aspect was watching Mark Brooks' psychological response. According to Aaron's reports, his father was becoming increasingly paranoid, convinced that unnamed competitors were orchestrating conspiracy against Brooks Manufacturing. "He's hired a private investigator to research Advanced Manufacturing Solutions," Aaron told me. "He's convinced they're bribing clients or engaging in corporate espionage. He can't accept that they're just better at manufacturing." The waiting game was almost over. Brooks Manufacturing was approaching total collapse, and Precision Dynamics was positioned to benefit from every aspect of their failure. The moment I had been waiting for arrived on a gray Tuesday morning in March. Aaron called me at 7 a.m., his voice barely containing excitement mixed with dread. "It's happening," he said simply. "Dad missed the quarterly debt payment to First National Bank yesterday. The grace period expires Friday. If they can't come up with $2.3 million by then, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings." 2.5 years of careful planning had led to this moment. Brooks Manufacturing was finally approaching the financial cliff I had predicted since my first presentation to their executive team. The only question now was whether we could execute our acquisition strategy before other vultures circled the carcass. Elizabeth Chen was already prepared. Our partnership agreement included provisions for rapid capital deployment when acquisition opportunities emerged. Within hours of Aaron's call, she had authorized the release of $5 million in acquisition funding, with an additional $3 million available if needed. "This is exactly what we've been planning for," Elizabeth told me during our emergency conference call. "Brooks Manufacturing's equipment alone is worth $12 million. If we can acquire it for $5 million at bankruptcy auction, we'll have the most modern precision manufacturing facility in the region at 40% of replacement cost." But timing was everything. We needed Brooks Manufacturing to collapse completely, not just restructure or find alternative financing that would allow them to continue limping along. A partial bankruptcy or debt workout could leave us competing with a wounded but still operational company using equipment we wanted to acquire. The key was ensuring that no white knight investor would rescue Brooks Manufacturing at the last minute. Aaron's intelligence suggested that Mark Brooks had been quietly reaching out to potential partners, including several private equity firms that specialized in distressed manufacturing companies. "Dad's been having meetings with Wolverine Capital Partners," Aaron reported during one of our strategy sessions. "They've been asking detailed questions about equipment values and client relationships. I think they're considering a buyout offer." This was exactly the scenario we needed to prevent. Wolverine Capital had a reputation for acquiring failing manufacturers, installing new management, and implementing the kind of modernization programs that could actually save Brooks Manufacturing. Our counter-strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Over the past 18 months, we had systematically undermined the two assets that made Brooks Manufacturing attractive to potential acquirers: their client relationships and their skilled workforce. The talent exodus we had orchestrated wasn't just about recruiting good employees for Precision Dynamics. It was about ensuring that any potential acquirer would face the massive challenge of rebuilding institutional knowledge from scratch. The client defections we had accelerated through strategic positioning weren't just about growing our own business. They were about ensuring that Brooks Manufacturing's revenue base would be too small to justify a rescue investment. Janet Olson had prepared all the legal documentation we would need to move quickly once bankruptcy proceedings began. Corporate structures were in place to acquire specific assets while avoiding inherited liabilities. Environmental assessments had been completed to ensure no hidden contamination issues would complicate the purchase. Most importantly, we had identified the specific pieces of equipment we wanted to acquire, and their estimated auction values. The crown jewel was Brooks Manufacturing's newest CNC machining center, purchased just 3 years ago, for $1.8 million. In a bankruptcy auction, we expected to acquire it for less than $600,000. Michael Evans, our former Brooks Manufacturing production supervisor, had already designed the workflow integration that would allow us to install Brooks equipment in our expanded facility within 60 days of acquisition. We had even negotiated lease agreements for additional facility space that would accommodate the increased production capacity. The psychological pressure on Mark Brooks was becoming unbearable. According to Aaron's reports, his father was alternating between rage and despair, unable to accept that decades of proven business practices had led to total failure. Yesterday he asked me if I would consider coming back to help save the company, Aaron told me. He actually said he might be willing to try some of those modern approaches I had suggested. Too little, too late. The time for saving Brooks Manufacturing had passed months ago. Now we were simply waiting for the inevitable conclusion of a process we had helped orchestrate. The setup was complete. Brooks Manufacturing was 48 hours away from financial collapse, and Precision Dynamics was positioned to acquire their assets at a fraction of their true value. Everything Mark Brooks had built was about to become mine. The bankruptcy auction was held on a cold Friday morning in November at the Brooks Manufacturing facility. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to purchase the company that had fired me, in the very building where I had been told my ideas were worthless. The auction drew a modest crowd: several equipment dealers, two competing manufacturers, and a handful of investors looking for bargains. None of them understood what they were really witnessing: the systematic transfer of a century-old company's assets to the woman they had dismissed as irrelevant. Mark Brooks sat in the front row, his face ashen as the auctioneer began cataloging the machinery and equipment he had inherited from his father and grandfather. Spencer was beside him, fidgeting nervously and avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. I had positioned myself near the back, wearing a tailored navy suit and professional demeanor that projected quiet confidence. To the other bidders, I was simply another investor looking for opportunities in distressed manufacturing assets. The bidding began with smaller items: office furniture, vehicles, miscellaneous tooling. I participated selectively, acquiring specific pieces that fit our operational plans while avoiding anything that might signal my broader intentions. Then the auctioneer called for bids on the crown jewel, the Haas VF6 CNC machining center, that Brooks Manufacturing had purchased 3 years earlier for $1.8 million. "We'll start the bidding at $500,000, the auctioneer announced. Silence filled the room. The opening bid was already higher than most attendees were prepared to pay for a single piece of equipment. $400,000, called one of the equipment dealers. $450,000, responded a representative from Advanced Manufacturing Solutions. I waited, letting the bidding progress naturally. When it reached $600,000 and the pace slowed, I raised my hand. $700,000, the room stirred. This was serious money for a bankruptcy auction, more than most individual pieces of equipment commanded even in normal sales. Advanced Manufacturing's representative looked frustrated, but countered with $750,000. The equipment dealer dropped out entirely. $800,000, I said calmly. At this point, Mark Brooks turned in his seat to look at me directly. His eyes narrowed as he tried to place my face. I could see the moment of recognition dawning. The woman from the quarterly review meetings, the daughter-in-law, who had been fired for asking uncomfortable questions about the company's future. Spencer saw his father's reaction and followed his gaze. When he spotted me, his face went white. He leaned over to whisper urgently in Mark's ear, but the older man waved him off, his attention fixed on me with growing understanding. The Advanced Manufacturing representative hesitated, then shook his head. $800,000, going once, called the auctioneer. I remained perfectly still, projecting the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Going twice. Mark Brooks stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. "Wait," he called out, his voice cracking slightly. "I need to know who's bidding." The auctioneer looked annoyed. "Sir, this is a public auction. All qualified bidders have been pre-approved for financing. $800,000, sold to bidder number 17. I walked forward to complete the paperwork, my heels clicking against the concrete floor in the sudden silence. As I approached the registration table, Mark Brooks intercepted me. "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're Gabriella Evans." "Actually," I replied, meeting his eyes with steady composure. "I'm Gabriella Evans, CEO of Precision Dynamics, and I believe I just purchased your company's most valuable asset." The recognition was complete now. Spencer joined his father, both of them staring at me with expressions of shock and dawning horror. "How is this possible?" Spencer stammered. I was just the marketing coordinator, whose strategic insights you dismissed as academic theories," I finished for him. "The woman whose comprehensive analysis of industry trends you ignored. The wife you allowed your father to fire, rather than defend." Mark Brooks's hands were trembling. "This is impossible. You couldn't have. You don't have the capital to—" "Actually, I have considerably more capital than you realized. Precision Dynamics is backed by Meridian Investment Group, and we've been planning this acquisition for quite some time." The auctioneer was calling the next lot, but the Brooks men weren't listening. They were processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "You destroyed my company," Mark said, his voice hollow. "No," I replied quietly. "You destroyed your company. I simply built a better one from the pieces you threw away." The revelation was complete. The woman they had underestimated, excluded, and ultimately eliminated, had returned to claim everything they had lost through their own stubborn refusal to change. And this was only the beginning. The auction continued for another 3 hours, but the Brooks family's world had already ended. I systematically acquired every piece of equipment that aligned with Precision Dynamics' expansion plans, spending a total of $4.2 million to purchase assets worth over $10 million at replacement value. Mark Brooks remained in his seat, watching in stunned silence, as 99 years of family legacy was dismantled lot by lot. Spencer had left after the first hour, unable to witness the complete liquidation of everything he had expected to inherit. When the auctioneer's gavel fell for the final time, I owned the manufacturing heart of Brooks Manufacturing, while paying less than half of what Mark Brooks had originally invested in the equipment. But the immediate justice was just beginning. As the crowd dispersed, I approached Mark Brooks one final time. He looked older than his 65 years, aged by the shock of discovering that his family's destruction had been orchestrated by the woman he had dismissed as irrelevant. "I want you to understand something," I said quietly, ensuring that our conversation remained private. "Everything that happened here today was avoidable. 3 years ago, I presented you with a comprehensive analysis of industry trends and specific recommendations for adapting to market changes. You dismissed those recommendations because they came from someone you didn't consider qualified to have strategic insights." Mark's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "You planned this, all of it. I planned to succeed in an industry where your company was failing due to poor leadership and strategic blindness. The fact that your failure created opportunities for my success is simply justice." I pulled out a folder I had been carrying and handed it to him. Inside were copies of every presentation I had made, every memo I had written, every suggestion I had offered during my 18 months as his employee. "These are all the ideas you rejected," I explained. "The electric vehicle component opportunities that could have generated $50 million in new revenue. The automation investments that could have improved quality and reduced costs. The client relationship strategies that could have prevented the contract losses that ultimately destroyed your cash flow." Mark's hands shook as he flipped through the pages, recognizing his own handwritten notes dismissing each proposal as theoretical or premature. "Every solution to every problem that eventually destroyed your company was sitting in your desk drawer, rejected because you couldn't accept strategic input from a woman with an MBA. The final piece of immediate justice came in the form of a certified letter I handed him as he prepared to leave the building for the last time. "This is from the Michigan Department of Labor," I explained. "Precision Dynamics is prepared to offer employment to any former Brooks Manufacturing worker who meets our qualification standards. We're particularly interested in skilled machinists, quality control specialists." Mark stared at the letter, understanding its implications. Not only had I acquired his equipment, but I was offering his former employees better opportunities than he had ever provided. 47 of your former employees have already accepted positions with Precision Dynamics," I continued. "They'll be working with modern equipment, comprehensive benefits, and management that values their expertise and input, including my son," Mark said quietly. "Aaron Brooks is Chief Technology Officer of Precision Dynamics. He's implementing all the process improvements and automation systems you refuse to consider. Within 6 months, we'll be producing higher quality components at lower costs than Brooks Manufacturing ever achieved." The look of complete defeat in Mark's eyes was perhaps the most satisfying moment of the entire process. He was finally understanding the full scope of what his arrogance and sexism had cost him. "The automotive industry didn't leave you behind," I said, as he turned to walk away. "You chose to stay behind because you couldn't imagine that anyone other than an old white man could understand your business better than you did." As Mark Brooks walked out of his family's factory for the last time, I remained behind to oversee the equipment removal process. Michael Evans and our logistics team were already coordinating the transfer of machinery to our expanded facility. "Mrs. Evans," Michael said, approaching with obvious satisfaction, "the installation timeline looks excellent. We should have full production capability restored within 60 days. Actually," I corrected him with a smile, "call me Gabriella. We don't do formal hierarchies at Precision Dynamics. Everyone's expertise is valued equally." The immediate justice was complete. Brooks Manufacturing was finished, their equipment was mine, their best employees were joining my company, and their former clients were already receiving better service from Precision Dynamics than they had ever received from the Brooks family. But this was just the beginning of their complete humiliation. 6 months after the bankruptcy auction, the transformation was complete. Precision Dynamics had not only absorbed Brooks Manufacturing's physical assets, but had systematically captured their former market position while exceeding every performance metric the old company had ever achieved. Our integrated facility was a monument to everything Mark Brooks had refused to embrace. The equipment I had purchased at auction was now part of an automated production line that could switch between different product types within hours instead of days. Quality control systems provided real-time monitoring that caught defects Brooks Manufacturing's manual inspections had missed for decades. The numbers told the story of complete vindication. Production efficiency was 43% higher than Brooks Manufacturing's peak performance. Defect rates had dropped to less than 0.2%, compared to Brooks's industry-worst 3.8%. Delivery times averaged 60% faster than Brooks had ever achieved. But the most satisfying victory was winning back every major client that Brooks Manufacturing had lost through their incompetence and arrogance. Ford's procurement team visited our facility in March and immediately reinstated their precision component contracts, but with volumes 50% larger than they had ever given Brooks Manufacturing. "This is what we were hoping Brooks could become," Michael Davidson explained during the contract signing. "You've demonstrated capabilities they claimed were impossible to achieve." General Motors followed within weeks, awarding us the electric vehicle component contracts that Susan Chen had practically begged Brooks Manufacturing to bid on 3 years earlier. The value was even larger than my original projections, $68 million over 5 years. Tesla expanded our initial development contract into a full production agreement worth $15 million annually. When their quality assurance team toured our facility, they specifically noted the integration between traditional precision manufacturing and advanced automation systems. "This is the future of automotive component manufacturing," Tesla's engineering director told me during the tour. "You've created capabilities that most companies will spend years trying to match." The industry recognition was overwhelming. Manufacturing Excellence magazine featured Precision Dynamics on their cover, with the headline "Next Generation Manufacturing: How Innovation Defeats Tradition." I was invited to speak at the National Manufacturing Summit about strategic transformation in traditional industries. But perhaps the sweetest victory was the personal impact on the Brooks family themselves. Spencer had taken a sales position with a small industrial supply company in Toledo, earning roughly 30% of his former Brooks Manufacturing salary. According to industry contacts, he was struggling to adapt to an environment where his last name carried no special authority. Mark Brooks had retreated to his Forest Hills home, emerging only for occasional rounds of golf at the country club where former business associates politely avoided discussing his spectacular failure. The man who had once commanded respect as the head of a century-old manufacturing dynasty was now a cautionary tale about what happens when family businesses refuse to evolve. Aaron had flourished as our chief technology officer, implementing every innovation he had tried unsuccessfully to introduce at Brooks Manufacturing. His automation systems were being studied by industry leaders as examples of best practices in modern manufacturing. "I finally get to build the company I always knew we could be," Aaron told me during one of our quarterly reviews. "Everything I suggested to Dad for years is now industry standard at Precision Dynamics." The transformation extended beyond just our company. The 47 former Brooks Manufacturing employees we had hired were earning an average of 28% more than their previous salaries, while working with equipment and processes that made their jobs more efficient and satisfying. Margaret Olson, the former quality control manager, had become our director of quality assurance and was implementing statistical process control systems that eliminated the constant firefighting that had characterized her Brooks Manufacturing experience. "For the first time in 12 years, I'm proud of the products we ship," Margaret told me. "Every component meets specifications because we have the equipment and processes to ensure consistency." The complete victory extended even to our supplier relationships. Companies that had struggled with Brooks Manufacturing's unreliable payments and changing requirements were eager to work with Precision Dynamics' transparent processes and reliable cash flow. Elena Rodriguez, the CEO of Precision Components Inc., whose proposal Mark Brooks had rejected because she seemed aggressive, became one of our key strategic partners. Her company provided specialized materials that enabled us to achieve the tight tolerances Tesla required for their battery housing components. Working with Precision Dynamics is completely different from traditional manufacturers, Elena explained during a supplier appreciation dinner. You actually listen to our expertise and incorporate our suggestions into your design process. The victory was complete in every measurable way. We had built a better company using better processes while treating people better than the Brooks family ever had. Their failure had created opportunities for everyone except themselves, and I was just getting started. 2 years after the bankruptcy auction, Precision Dynamics had become everything I had envisioned when I first presented my strategic analysis to the Brooks Manufacturing executive team. We were no longer just a successful company, we were an industry leader reshaping how precision manufacturing could operate in the modern economy. The financial transformation was staggering. Precision Dynamics had grown from a startup with $3 million in initial funding to a company valued at over $200 million. Our annual revenue had reached $85 million, with profit margins that exceeded industry averages by 40%. Elizabeth Chen from Meridian Investment Group was preparing for what she called the most successful manufacturing investment in our portfolio's history. Private equity firms were already approaching us about potential acquisition offers, but I had no interest in selling the company I had built to replace the one that had rejected me. You've created something unprecedented, Elizabeth told me during our annual strategic review. Most manufacturing companies compete on either quality or cost. You've demonstrated that modern processes and inclusive management can deliver both simultaneously. The transformation extended far beyond financial metrics. Precision Dynamics had become a case study in business schools across the country, cited as an example of how traditional industries could adapt to changing market conditions through strategic innovation rather than defensive resistance. Harvard Business School invited me to participate in a case study titled Strategic Disruption in Traditional Manufacturing: The Precision Dynamics Model. The researchers were particularly interested in how we had systematically identified and exploited the competitive weaknesses of an established industry leader. What's remarkable about your approach, the lead researcher explained, is that you didn't just compete with Brooks Manufacturing, you made their entire business model obsolete by demonstrating superior alternatives to everything they considered unchangeable. The industry transformation we had initiated was spreading throughout the regional manufacturing sector. Other companies were implementing integrated automation systems, investing in employee development programs, and adopting transparent client communication processes that Precision Dynamics had pioneered. Advanced Manufacturing Solutions had hired 3 former Precision Dynamics engineers to help them implement similar quality control systems. Meridian Industries was restructuring their production processes based on workflows Aaron had designed for our facility. You forced the entire industry to evolve, David Chen told me during an industry conference. Companies that refuse to modernize are being left behind, just like Brooks Manufacturing was. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was personal. The woman who had been dismissed as irrelevant by the Brooks family leadership was now recognized as one of the most innovative executives in American manufacturing. Forbes named me to their 40 under 40 inches list of business leaders reshaping traditional industries. Manufacturing Today featured me on their cover with the headline, "The Future is Female: How Women Are Transforming Industrial Leadership." The speaking requests were constant. I addressed the National Association of Manufacturers about strategic innovation in traditional industries. The Society of Women Engineers invited me to keynote their annual conference on breaking barriers in male-dominated fields. Each speaking engagement was an opportunity to share the broader lesson of my experience, that diversity of perspective isn't just morally important, it's strategically essential for companies that want to survive in rapidly changing markets. The Brooks family failed not because they lacked resources or market position, I explained during a Harvard Business School presentation. They failed because they systematically excluded insights from anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of business expertise. Their prejudices blinded them to opportunities and solutions that were obvious to anyone willing to look beyond traditional approaches. The transformation's success extended to the broader community as well. Precision Dynamics employed over 300 people in the Grand Rapids area, with average salaries 25% higher than regional manufacturing norms. Our commitment to employee development had created advancement opportunities for workers who had been trapped in dead-end positions at traditional manufacturers. Janet Evans, one of our production supervisors, who had started as a machinist at Brooks Manufacturing, exemplified the personal transformation our company enabled. She was now pursuing an engineering degree through our tuition assistance program, while managing a team of 12 skilled technicians. At Brooks, I was told that production workers shouldn't worry about engineering concepts, Janet explained during a company newsletter interview. At Precision Dynamics, my suggestions for process improvements are taken seriously and often implemented. I'm not just operating equipment, I'm helping design better ways to manufacture products. The contrast with Brooks Manufacturing's current situation could not have been more stark. Mark Brooks had sold the family home and moved to a modest condominium in a less prestigious neighborhood. The man who had once commanded respect as the patriarch of a manufacturing dynasty was now largely forgotten by an industry that had moved beyond his outdated approaches. Spencer remained in Toledo, struggling with the realization that his birthright had evaporated due to his family's arrogance and his own failure to defend the person who could have saved their company. The transformation was complete. I had built something better than what they had destroyed, and everyone except the Brooks family was benefiting from their failure to recognize talent and adapt to change. But there was still one final message I needed to deliver. If you're listening to this story, chances are you've faced your own version of the Brooks family. Maybe it's a boss who dismisses your ideas because of your age, your gender, or your background. Maybe it's a company that promotes incompetence while sidelining talent. Maybe it's a system that tells you to be grateful for scraps while denying you a seat at the table where real decisions are made. I want you to know something: they're wrong about you. When Mark Brooks told me that strategic planning was beyond the scope of my role, he wasn't making a business decision, he was revealing his own limitation. When Spencer chose his father's approval over our partnership, he wasn't protecting family loyalty, he was demonstrating that he valued hierarchy more than competence. Their dismissal of my capabilities said nothing about my actual worth, and everything about their inability to recognize talent that didn't match their narrow expectations. You might be thinking that my story is unique, that I had advantages you don't have: an MBA, industry connections, access to capital. But here's what I really had: clarity about my own value and absolute determination to prove it. The MBA didn't give me strategic insights, it gave me vocabulary to articulate insights I already possessed. The industry connections didn't create opportunities, they simply provided platforms to demonstrate capabilities I had been developing all along. The capital didn't guarantee success, it enabled me to act on plans I had been perfecting for years. What truly mattered was my refusal to accept other people's limitations as my own reality. When they said I couldn't understand their business, I studied it more thoroughly than they ever had. When they said I was too inexperienced to contribute strategic value, I developed strategies that exceeded anything their experienced leadership had conceived. When they said I didn't belong in their world, I built a better world and invited everyone except them to join me. The most important lesson of my experience isn't about revenge, it's about recognition. You already possess capabilities that the people dismissing you cannot see or choose not to acknowledge. Your insights are valid, your perspectives are valuable, your contributions matter. But waiting for recognition from people who are invested in your marginalization is a waste of your potential. Instead of trying to earn acceptance from those who benefit from excluding you, focus on building alternatives that make their approval irrelevant. Document everything, learn constantly, build relationships with people who recognize your worth, develop skills that no one can dismiss or deny, and when the opportunity comes, because it will come, be ready to demonstrate what you're truly capable of achieving. The system that rejected you is probably failing anyway. Traditional hierarchies that exclude talent based on irrelevant characteristics are losing ground to more inclusive and innovative approaches. Companies that dismiss diverse perspectives are being outcompeted by organizations that embrace them. You don't need to destroy your detractors to succeed, their own limitations will eventually destroy them. Your job is to build something better while they're busy defending what's already broken. Remember this: every person who has ever told you that you're not qualified, not ready, not suitable, or not valuable, is simply revealing their own fear of what you might accomplish if given the chance. Their doubt is not evidence of your inadequacy, it's evidence of their insecurity. The Brooks family spent 3 years watching me build everything they had lost through their own arrogance. They could have been part of the solution, but they chose to be the problem. Don't let anyone make that choice for you. Your worth is not determined by their recognition. Your capabilities are not limited by their imagination. Your future is not constrained by their expectations. Build your own table, create your own opportunities, define your own success, and when they finally realize what they missed, you'll be too busy succeeding to care about their regret. The power was always yours. It's time to use it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.